Guys, what's going on? I hope you guys are well. I hope you guys are staying safe. I hope everything's good wherever you are. Guys, I hope you guys are keeping well. Smash the like button, hit the subscribe button, share the video. As always, guys, I know you guys will always share my videos. I appreciate your support over the course of the channel. Thank you very much. Let's get into this video. Guys, Eddie Hearn made a statement that Jermall Charlo has fought nobody. He said Jermall Charlo has fought absolutely nobody. And that Canelo Alvarez is, you know, his next opponent probably should be Golovkin. Or I want to talk about Jermall Charlo. Forget about Canelo. Talk about Jermall Charlo in this video. Has Jermall Charlo fought nobody? I've got Jermall Charlo's box rec up in front of me, and Jermall Charlo, for me, it's been a bit disappointing because he hasn't really got the marquee fights. And to be honest with you, for me, he's been avoiding Demetrius Andrade, and that was a fight that could have easily been made at 160 pounds. And it looks like, for whatever reason, Jermall Charlo doesn't want to fight Demetrius Andrade. Is that because he's probably thinking that I'm going to fight Canelo? I don't know. But Jermall Charlo's resume here, I've got his resume up now. And Jermall Charlo's got some really good names. He has got some good names on there. Cornelius Brundage. And he's got Austin Trout, Julian Williams. He's got Matty Korobov. He's got Sergey Derevyanchenko. So he has got some names on there. You know, he's got Dennis Hogan, but, you know, he's expected to beat Hogan. But I definitely think Brundage, Austin Trout, Julian Williams, and Matty Korobov, Sergey Derevyanchenko, these are 5 solid names, in my opinion. I think these are quite strong names. They're not elite fighters, but they're very strong names. I will put a question mark by Matty Korobov's name, because I don't think he won that fight. I think that was very controversial. I thought Korobov potentially won that fight, and maybe that's the reason the Andrade fight hasn't happened, because I think maybe they think that Demetrius Andrade would do the same thing, and he's a better version of Matty Korobov. Hence why there's been that, you know, reluctanceness to fight someone like Demetrius Andrade. But I disagree with Eddie Hearn here. I don't think Jermall Charlo... What I will agree with Eddie Hearn, I don't think Jermall Charlo has had meaningful fights. Has he ever had a unification fight? I don't think he's had a unification fight ever. Correct me if I'm wrong, guys. I don't think he's ever had a unification fight. So he's never really had a meaningful fight against another top-grade fighter. He's beaten some solid names like the ones that I mentioned. But he hasn't really beaten anyone in a unification fight. He hasn't really had that big super fight yet, you know? All of these guys that I've named, these solid names, he's probably expected to beat them. You know, Austin Trout, Brundage, Matty Korobov, Derevyanchenko. These are all names that he's supposed to beat. You know, so even though there's some solid names, I wouldn't go as far as saying that Charlo hasn't fought anybody. You know, I definitely think Charlo's resume there. Julian Williams is a good fighter, very good fighter. And if I'm not mistaken, isn't Julian Williams... Has Julian Williams lost? Yeah, I think he lost. Did he lose to Heard? Oh, no, he beat Heard. Has Julian Williams only lost once? I think he's only lost once, you know. Correct me if I'm wrong. Oh, no, he lost to Rosario, didn't he? Williams lost to Rosario. He might have lost twice, I think. But that's an excellent win. And if I'm not mistaken, was that the fight where he hit him with an uppercut? Or no, was that Erickson Lubin? That was Jermall. I can't remember. But yeah, I know that Jermall has beaten... So Jermall has beaten Julian Williams by KO. Yeah, that might have actually been the uppercut. Or was that Lubin? I don't know. Correct. Let me know, guys. I know that Jermall KO Julian Williams. Was that the uppercut where he landed that peach of an uppercut? So Jermall has definitely got some good wins. There's no doubt about it. So I disagree with Eddie Hearn that he's not beaten anybody, because he definitely has. He definitely has beaten some good names. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Like 5 solid names on there. You know, Derevyanchenko, Korobov, Williams, Trout, and Brundage. I definitely think those are some real wins. Especially 4 anyway. I think Williams, Trout, Derevyanchenko and Korobov are definitely... But the Korobov fight has a question mark for me, because I don't know whether he won that fight, to be brutally honest. But the others are some solid names. So I disagree with Eddie Hearn's judgment of him not fighting anybody. I definitely think Jermall Charlo has fought some decent and good names in the sport of boxing. I don't think he's got any marquee wins in the sense that he hasn't had no unification fights. He hasn't had any wins, or he hasn't had any names on there like an Andrade, where you would say it's an undefeated, another world champion that he's fighting in a unification fight. So he hasn't had any big major fights. He's had fights that, yeah, you expect him to win these fights. But, so he lacks that marquee win. So I disagree with Eddie Hearn that he's not boxed anybody and he's fought nobody. Because he has fought some good fighters. Julian Williams is a good fighter. Korobov is a good fighter. Derevyanchenko is a good fighter. Austin Trout's a good fighter. So they are by no means... Let's not forget Canelo fought Austin Trout. Right? And that wasn't an easy fight for Canelo. Let's just get out there that Austin Trout was a hard fight for Canelo. Not an easy fight. Right? I think you'd all agree that Austin Trout was not an easy fight for Canelo Alvarez. So Jermall Charlo's fought him. So I definitely don't think Jermall Charlo has got a bad resume. I don't think he's like fought nobody and he's like Andrade type resume, but he's definitely not got the... I think he's not got the marquee wins on there. I think he hasn't got the big fights, like Eddie Hearn said, that we were trying to make the Andrade fight, but Charlo didn't want it. That hurts Charlo's legacy, because at the end of the day, when people look back at your career, these aren't names that are going to be remembered. People aren't going to say, oh, you beat Korobov, you beat Williams, you beat Derevyanchenko, you beat Korobov. You beat Austin Trout, Williams, Derevyanchenko. No one's going to say that. People want to see you in big fights where it means something. Like when he fights Canelo, that's a big fight. When he fights Andrade, that's a big fight. There'll be a lot of hype around those fights. These type of fights, nobody really cares. So I can see where Eddie Hearn's coming from when he said he's fought nobodies, even though I don't agree with it, because I don't think these are nobodies that I'm mentioning. But in terms of the stature of the fights that he's been involved in, he hasn't really been involved in any super fight or any big fight of that nature where you can say, well, oh, he beat so-and-so, or he beat him, he beat her, he beat him. He hasn't been involved in any of that, of those type of fights, unification fights. Neither has Andrade, but Andrade has fought a lot of no-names. A lot of guys that you would say are not as good as the names that I'm mentioning here. At least this guy's got some decent names on there. So I think Jermall Charlo, what he needs now is he needs a breakout fight. Now, the Canelo fight is the one that's being talked about, but again, I think personally, I think these guys, although Andrade has fought some decent names, he's much better equipped. He's got a much better resume than Billy Joe, Callum Smith. He's got a better resume than all those guys. Because like I said, those names that I'm mentioning are solid wins. They're not easy fights. So Charlo's definitely got a better resume than most guys that Canelo's fought of late. However, he hasn't had a big fight. What I mean by a big fight, he hasn't fought a Demetrius Andrade. He hasn't fought a David Benavidez. He ain't fought a Billy Joe. He ain't fought someone of that ilk where you can say it's a big fight. He's fought a lot of guys like this, which you kind of expect him to win. And some of these were at 154, like the Trout fight, I believe, was at 154, right? What was it? Yeah, Super welter title. Julian Williams, Super welter. So yeah, so look, some of those wins were at 154. The Derevyanchenko was at middleweight. Korobov was at middleweight, I believe. So yeah, so he's had some good wins at middleweight, and he's had some good wins at light middleweight. But neither of those wins were marquee wins. Neither of them was like super wins. He hasn't had a unification fight. Look at his brother. Maybe he moved up to middleweight because he didn't want to get in the way of his brother. So maybe they both decided who was tighter at the weight, and he probably thought, you go up to middleweight, let me clean up here at middleweight. Because if one of the brothers has a goal of cleaning up all the belts, them being at the same weight isn't going to help, because they're not going to fight each other, are they? They're not going to fight each other. So if they're not going to fight each other, then one of them might as well move up to middleweight, especially if Jermall was tight at the weight. But I think Jermall's legacy at this point is much better, especially if he goes on to beat Brian Castano, because Jermall is actually going to unify the whole division. So Jermall is actually better placed from a legacy standpoint, because Jermall holds 3 belts and he potentially could have 4 if he beats Brian Castano. So for me, Jermall has done a lot more in the sport and he's had a lot more big fights, because the Brian Castano fight is a big fight because it's an undisputed fight. So naturally, if you're fighting for all the belts, that's a big fight. Jermall hasn't had that. So Jermall needs to get a big fight. The Canelo Alvarez obviously will be a big fight and it'd be for all the belts, but it'd be a fight which I don't see him winning. So I think that will backfire, because then people will say when he stepped up, he got beat. When rather go into a fight with Andrade, which was a winnable fight, and then he could have won that and that would create a legacy. However, he's probably looking at it from a business point of view. If I go in with Andrade and get beat by Andrade, then, you know, my legacy's dented and I'm not going to get the big fight with Canelo. So I can see both ways. I can see from both angles. I can see from different point of view why he would and would not take the Canelo out, or sorry, why he wouldn't take the Andrade fight. But at the end of the day, you're going to hurt your legacy, because you're going to go in with someone like Canelo, you get beat by him, your career's done. And that's the issue I believe Charlo's going to have, is that I think he would be much better prepared if he had faced someone like an Andrade and beaten an Andrade. He would be better placed to fight someone like Canelo and beat someone like Canelo. But these guys, for me, like to pick and choose their ways to a big fight, like a lot of the fighters that fought Canelo previously did, like your Plants, Billy Joes, Callum Smith. And they're not prepared to fight someone like Canelo, and then when they get in the ring with him, they get beaten quite comfortably. And that's what I believe is going to happen with Charlo. But I will say this: I do think Charlo's resume is a lot better than Callum Smith's, Billy Joe's, and Plants. He's got some decent names on there. He's got some decent names on there, without question, without question. Whereas some of the other guys, they didn't have any names on there. They had hardly anyone. Like Callum Smith had George Groves, old washed up George Groves. Billy Joe had Lemieux and Andy Lee. That's it. Who else did? Plant, he had literally Utsakatsi, that's it. Apart from that, he had nobody. So like I said, their resumes were non-existent. And I don't think that helps when you're going in with someone as elite as Canelo. I think that's just very, very difficult to overcome somebody with that kind of experience and that kind of ability, when he's got all the, you know, he's had so much experience against so many good fighters, and then you're going in against him with lack of experience and not having been in there with the top quality opposition. I don't think that helps, you know. And that's my take on it. I think Charlo's resume is not, he's not fought nobodies. He's got some good names, but he hasn't had any marquee wins. He hasn't had any marquee big wins. That's just my take. But leave your thoughts, guys. Let me know what you think. Guys, remember to please like, share, and subscribe to my channel. I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.